Welcome to our final town hall of the year, and I'm Sam Masterson. I serve as the CEO for MGFA. We have our entire staff team on this evening, and I certainly see a number of board members joining us as well, and I see a lot of familiar faces throughout the community. So really want to thank everyone right off the top. First and foremost, just thank you so much for your support. Not for just attending this town hall, but for your support through the entire year. Let's just put it out there, 2020 has been filled with challenges, and we want to recognize that we understand that it has been a very tough year for a lot of different reasons. Some obvious reasons and certainly other reasons. Everybody has different things going on with their own lives, but we do want to recognize the fact that we could not be more grateful as an organization for all of your ongoing support to the organization, your dedication to the mission, and just for being part of this big, beautiful MG extended family that we have. We're very, very proud to be in this with you. We had a busy year. I have to say, you all stuck with us, and it really was quite amazing. We had to pivot and we had to adapt, and you all were there every step of the way, and we just appreciate that so very, very much. We've been excited to have this town hall. We were committed to having them. We started them in the summer. This is our third one. Once we started them, we wanted to host them every few months, every 2 to 3 months. And this is the final one for the year, but we are committed in 2021 to hosting them on a quarterly basis. So we will be doing that next year. We will be continuing the town halls. We do think it's important to get together with community members and to bring you along, and we want you in the loop. We want you to know what's going on with the organization. And tonight we have some fun updates, and certainly tonight is about really thanking our community and really shedding a spotlight on some of our volunteers who really helped us persevere this year. And we have some exciting things to share with you. So with that said, let me share a little bit with you about what to anticipate for this evening. We're going to talk about our do-it-yourself program, and then we're going to move on to advocacy. And we have some great speakers to present to you guys how you can plug in more and what does it really mean to be an advocate. And then we're going to have Dr. Guptill with Duke University School of Medicine, and who serves as the chair of our Medical and Scientific Advisory Board. Dr. Guptill is going to give our research update and talk to you about the grants that we awarded in 2020. We award grants every year, and it's important for you to know about those grants and the type of work that we're supporting as an organization. And we're going to wrap up with Dr. Guptill talking about COVID and the vaccines right now, because we know that that's top of mind for all of you and that people have questions. So we'll be doing that. And Dr. Mackel will be helping us with that. Dr. Charlie Mackel will be helping us with that as well. And I think she's a familiar name to a lot of you, but if she's not, you will hear her speak during the advocacy section. So we'll make sure that you become nice and familiar with each of the speakers. But now, why are we kicking it off with do-it-yourself? Well, we are kicking it off with do-it-yourself because of how grateful we feel this year. We do feel that it's very important to highlight some volunteers who got so creative and innovative with their events. And they really didn't let anything stop them this year or slow them down or hinder them. And they decided to still host fundraisers. And they did it through something called do-it-yourself. And MGFA, this is very exciting, is going to be officially launching a DIY program, a do-it-yourself program, early this coming year. Between January and February, you will start to hear more from us. And a full-fledged DIY program is actually a fundraising program where volunteers can plug in and decide what fundraising event they would like to host. And I don't want the word event to scare you, because we understand that hosting a walk or a run or a 5K is not for everybody. We get that. But with do-it-yourself, you can turn anything into it. You can take into a fundraiser. You can take a passion, you can take a talent, and you can turn it into a mini event. You can turn it into something you do one night over a weekend. Heck, we've had people take a girls' weekend or a guys' weekend, a ski weekend, and turn it into a fundraising event because they simply reached out to their whole network and asked people to make donations and turned that weekend into an event. I mean, you can get as creative as you want. You can do something with your birthday, a special anniversary. So we're going to hear from 3 very, very special volunteers who are going to tell you about the events that they hosted this year and how they went about it, why they did it, and the fundraising that resulted from it. So that's really exciting. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over now. I want to introduce you to Ronni Faust.
Yes, hi. I see you have my pre-COVID and post-COVID hair.
Ronni, you look great. I just want to say one quick thing. Ronni Faust is a cabaret singer, and I think this is an event in particular that the staff and I have been so very excited about. And a lot of you actually might recognize Ronni, because when we held our Together We Stand event, Ronni actually was the volunteer who welcomed everyone from the Northeast region when we went around to the different regions. So welcome, Ronni. We're so excited for you to share your event with folks.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was obviously a challenge like everybody else had this year. I usually do a cabaret show maybe every couple of years, and that involves, a whole hour of singing and guest singers and musicians backing me up. And this year, of course, we were going to do Ronni Faust Has Spring Fever, or Is It Just Allergies, which is my second show that I'm doing for MGFA. My first one was about getting old, and it was called Gravity is a Bitch. This one was actually very disappointing because I said, oh no, we can't do it. Everything's shut down, obviously. And so I said to my director, I want to do something. And he said, well, why don't we put maybe 3 of your songs together and make that the fundraiser? You can do a fundraiser with that, or do whatever you want with it. Do them separately, do them together. So I said, well, let's do them together, because not too many people are going to go to their wallets more than once in a year. So we put 3 songs together, all very different, and actually raised more money with that than we did for my first show, because I didn't have to pay the house. I didn't have to pay the musicians. And actually, I didn't deduct any of that anyway, but we ended up making more money with just 3 songs that I ended up putting on YouTube and Facebook, and huge emails that I would bug everybody with forever until they gave. And it was just more of a success than I could have imagined. I mean, I was really quite pleased with how it went. So I don't know, maybe next year we should do the same thing. I'm looking forward to doing my show finally, but if I can make more money for MGFA doing it in a different way, I'm going to talk to my director and see what we can come up with. But it was a lot of fun. I had a wonderful group of people working with me. Phil Kogan, who's my husband and why I'm involved with MGFA, served as the photographer. So it was kind of a family affair, since he's the only one I could get close to anyway. And it worked out really well. So anybody who wants to see it, I mean, I'm happy to send them the link. And we put the link and the donate button in the same place. So one was never without the other, which made it easy to donate after you saw it, or after you threw the tomatoes, or whatever you wanted to do. And I know I was just very pleased with the way it worked out. So that's my thing.
Thank you, Ronni. And we couldn't have been more appreciative, because Ronni just pivoted. She just, she and Phil shared that they're going to do this virtual event, and you heard her. I mean, they actually fundraised significantly more. So it's really, it was really a win-win. It's very exciting. And when she mentions Phil's actually, for all of you in the community, Phil is a board member for MGFA. So it really is a family affair, and we really do appreciate it.
Even the dog was in it. The dog was featured in one of the songs too. We made a diva out of him, but he's a good boy.
Yes, he is, and he's a gorgeous dog. Okay, thank you so much, Ronni. Really, really appreciate that. We'll look at the chat, as if we have any questions, we will we'll let you know.
Sure, thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a question. I don't know if you saw them on chat or not.
You just ask it right now, and then going forward, if everyone could just put their questions in the chat, that would be great. But yeah,
my question is, I didn't do a fundraiser because of the cost of. So I have a DJ who's willing to do a DJ dance party thing, but it's like $100 to cover before fundraising. So I didn't go forward. because I didn't know whether or not there would be enough funding coming in to cover the cost and still be a fundraiser. So how do you address concerns, or just not even worry about it?
Well, I mean, I had to pay my director anyway because I was doing a show. And I had to pay my music director anyway. And I had to pay my editor, which even with all of that, and I didn't charge that against MGFA. I mean, that I took out of my pocket. So it cost me about $800 out of my pocket. But I figured I was going to do that anyway. I mean, I was going to do a show anyway. So it was all money that I was going to spend regardless. But I knew I put a budget together before I did it, knowing what it was going to cost. And I went ahead with it because I do what I do for the love of it. I don't do it for money. If you do cabaret for money, you're going to starve. So, because the venues are small, you don't make the money. So, I just basically ate the money it cost to do it. And fortunately I had Phil, so I didn't have to pay a photographer, although he gets paid in many other ways. But, but you figure it's the cost of doing business. And all of these things cost money to do. I mean, there's very little that doesn't. So
I mean, I kind of looked at it could have been a social event, even if it didn't work as a fundraiser. I just didn't make that leap. So I was,
So Deb, we're going to have a staff person in charge of do-it-yourself fundraising and community events, and that's Sam Gardner. And as Ronni said, the first thing to do is put together a little budget, on paper, is what you think your costs are, and what you want to ask people to donate, for the event, and kind of run through your contacts. Say, hey, if I did this, would you donate $25 to come, or whatever you want the numbers to be? And you'll see pretty quickly, you'll get everything covered if they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And if for some reason you make the decision, like Ronni does, like whatever the cost is, that's my donation, and then I'm going to bring everything.
I thought about that instead of donating to MGFA. I mean,
right, but you're not donating to MGFA. You're just paying it as kind of a way to get the money into MGFA. So I don't think I understand hesitancy, but Sam can walk you through how to build out a little website on a platform we used called Classy, and you can send people from all over the country there to donate, even if they can't attend the event, to help cover your costs. You can talk to any vendors that you use throughout the year personally. In a normal year, dry cleaners, whoever you frequent a lot, to make a $100 donation to help you cover your costs, things like that. And before you know it, we'll have you on staff raising money for us.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, and I guess my hesitation this year was because I didn't know how much we would get because of COVID. And I knew my husband's company, Netflix, doubled our donation. So I was kind of like, well, $100 to bring in a DJ versus $100 through Netflix, like, Matt doubled, obviously becomes $300, and I didn't know if so that
and you also start, if you raise $1,000, $1,200, like the next program we're going to hear about, which was great, it may turn into $2,500 the second year because of word of mouth and potential sponsors. So, we're looking for people to get involved. This is called really grassroots fundraising at its best. And it doesn't have to be a $50,000 event. That's not what this is about. This is about.
I was my own barrier. I'll admit it. I was my own barrier,
You're doing something you love and getting over that little hurdle. And I guarantee you, it's going to be terrific because you're going to love doing it.
Yeah, I was my own enemy. So I'm not going to take your time.
Right. And the other thing that's good that you can do, I mean, I laid so many guilt trips on people. I mean, you got to do that too, because, I donate to their shtick, so if I'm going to donate to cancer and Alzheimer's and all that other stuff, turnaround is fair play. And they know it, and I know it, and I don't have to say it out loud, but it's,
Ronni, we might have to explain shtick to other people on the call. Okay?
I was just laughing because I'm like, the Jewish guilt is so great. I mean, I'm from back.
Yeah, it works. It does work.
Okay, thanks. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Craig yet, Craig Strainer, who just jumped in, he's our Vice President of Development. So He works with Sam Gardner. Sam Gardner oversees the walks and will oversee our DIY program. And Craig, as the head of development, just so you all know, oversees all of individual giving, corporate giving, and all of fundraising. So our next volunteer that I'd like to introduce is Katie Oradini. And Craig just mentioned Katie. I mean, this is a great story. This was Katie's first year in 2020 hosting a fundraiser. We learned on the last call that it was her first time trying anything like this. So it makes it that more exciting to learn about. So Katie, welcome, and thank you so much in advance for sharing your story.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for the warm welcome. And hi, everyone. I'm Katie. I'm located here in the Cleveland, Ohio area, more specifically North Ridgeville, and that's where I own and operate my yoga studio. It's called Farmhouse. And so my fundraiser was in honor of my mom, who was diagnosed in April of 2019. So it's been a little over a year and a half. The first year that she was diagnosed, well, right away, the diagnosis, nobody in our family had ever heard of MG. We weren't really sure what we were dealing with, and we kind of took the first year as a family to just take that learning curve, understand what was ahead of us, and allow my mom that comfort space to just navigate through a new chapter. So once we had our bearings and the studio, of course, was kind of up and running, a year later, I launched the fundraiser. So it happened in June, this past summer, 2020. And it's kind of twofold. So the yoga studio itself is my platform of my ability to actually raise awareness and bring attention to this. So I had that as a resource. But the second component of the fundraiser being the yoga studio is it has a connection personally to my mom as well, with her journey and navigation through MG. So luckily I was certified at the time that she was diagnosed. So we were able to use yoga as a way for her to just connect with her breathing, work on relaxation, heal and recover the nervous system, and just really navigate through this new space and connect with her body. So it was really cool that the fundraiser kind of came full circle for her as well. And so the fundraiser was a really great way for my mom and our whole family to just take our first step into the MG community. This was the first time that my mom had met other people with it. And it was really powerful for her to just talk to people who have lived with MG for many years and kind of reassure her that things were going to be okay and this is doable and manageable. So it's really powerful in that way. In terms of COVID-19 and 2020 struggles, we were lucky that the studio is actually on a farm. So I got to utilize a lot of outdoor space. The class itself was outdoors. Everyone was able to social distance, wear masks, and just take a lot of space, which was pretty much the only reason I could host a fundraiser. So I was lucky that MG awareness fell in the summer. So thank goodness for that. We were able to be outside. And so some people came to the class and donated. Other people just stopped by, said hello, donated, or made donations online if they couldn't attend. So it was a really great space. It was good to show my mom support and just make my first connection into the MG community, because I'd love to stay involved on her behalf. And we met a lot of great people along the way. And as Craig mentioned, I raised $1,200, which for me as a new business owner at 26, that was like jackpot. So I felt like that was a ton of money and I was so excited to donate it. I thought it was a huge deal. So it was
Katie,
really
tell them what your goal was. Tell them what your original goal was.
Yeah, I was putting up the plans and just accounting for food and stuff like that. And I was like, all right, $150 should probably be good. So I was blown away.
It's so great. It's so great. And you're doing something that you love and it has so many health benefits. I mean, I'm looking at your picture and just who wouldn't want to lay down on a blanket or a towel right there and be totally zen.
You were very lucky with the weather. It was a perfect day and it really worked out. So
great. Well, thank you so much. We are thrilled that you've decided to obviously support MGFA, but more importantly, to become part of this extended MG family. So thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for walking people through your event. As a first timer, I think that gives people a lot of ideas and a lot of hope.
Definitely.
Okay. And finally, for our DIY section, I'd like to introduce you all to Jeff Abramson. Jeff hosts a memorial golf outing in memory of his wife, Patty. And he is going to talk to us now about the golf tournament. And Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you now. Just need to.
Okay. We're good?
You're good. You're good.
Okay, thank you. About a little over 3 years ago, my wife Patty passed away from stomach cancer at the age of 53. But most of her life she had MG. So a dear friend of ours, I live in a golf community down here in Sarasota, Florida, on a golf course. And the dear friend came over to me and said, what do you think about doing a memorial golf outing for Patty? And I thought about doing it, but she really convinced me to do it. So we went ahead with family and friends to organize this thing. We had no idea what we were really doing. It was the first time I've ever done anything like this. I call it a mom and pop operation. But so we went ahead and did it the first year. And to be honest with you, I was hoping to make maybe a couple $1,000s. I had no idea what we was getting into or what was involved. But at the end of the event, the first year, we were able to bring home over $17,000, which was pretty incredible. I couldn't even imagine doing that. The second year we did it was last year. We continued to do it. We were able to bring home over $29,000, which is pretty extraordinary. The whole thing is just mind-boggling when you come down to it. For just a golf outing and all the support and the help I get down here is truly tremendous. This year was a little different because 2020, as everyone knows with the pandemic, I was really concerned that we weren't going to be able to have the golf outing. And my concern was if we didn't do the golf outing, we would lose momentum going into the fourth year. So I went to our golf pro, spoke with him several times, and he went to the board of directors here at my golf course, Heritage Oaks. He convinced them it was important to have this thing in memory of Patty for MG, and it has to happen. So with the blessing of the board, it was 100% approved. They told me I can go ahead with the outing with some restrictions, of course. We were only allowed to have 18 foursomes this year, which was roughly about 72 golfers, when last year we had over 100 golfers. We also had to have individual tee times. And last year we had a shotgun, the last 2 years a shotgun, which makes it go much faster. But the individual tee times was fine with me. What we also provide is golf, a gift, and dinner, and an award ceremony afterwards. One thing I forgot to do in the first meeting is thank Mike Lipschitz. He's come here the last 3 years, and I really appreciate it. He makes a nice presentation, and not many people know what MG is. That's why we decided to do MG for the MG Foundation. So Mike, the last 3 years, have come down here and explained what MG is. And 95% of the people, like I said, have no clue what it is. And a lot of people after the first year came up to me and said, we didn't realize what it was. Now we understand, which made a big difference and a big help. So this year, believe it or not, we were able to take home $24,000. So the 3 year total, we've brought in over $70,000 for MG. So I'm really happy about it. Next year's outing's already set, October 22nd. It'll be the fourth year of doing this, and hopefully it'll be more successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate you sharing the golf tournament with the community members. And because I think that this is an event that might catch the ear of others. I know that we've had inquiries about how to start a golf tournament. And so I really appreciate you sharing this with folks. And to your great surprise, what you guys raised in the first year. I think that's very helpful and puts a lot of minds at ease when you're thinking about that.
And just to let you know, yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Sam, I just wanted to jump in and make sure people understand when Jeff is talking about taking home and making that donation. Jeff has taken it to a different level by starting his own foundation, so people can register with his foundation. Jeff pays the bills through that foundation and then makes it a net check to MGFA. So this is of the highest level of do-it-yourself, going from, you know, the start of something all the way to putting together your own foundation, which again, we'll use Jeff throughout the year when people want to talk about starting their own foundation or organization to run an event to raise money for MGFA. We will send them Jeff's way.
That's not a problem. And it's not as difficult as you may think it is. I mean, it really runs itself. Once you get it started, it rolls. And like I said, it's been spectacular what we've been able to do. And we're looking forward to next year already. And a lot of people down here have been asked me already, we're going to come in next year. So we should be good to go for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I also just want to say quickly that in the beginning, you said mom and pops, and that's okay, because that's what DIY is about. So
Yeah.
it's grassroots fundraising at its best.
It's an old New York expression, mom and
Yeah.
pop.
I get it. I get it. Okay. We're going to now transition to what is patient advocacy. And I'm so excited. You're going to hear now from Jenna Mavallo, who is our Director of Patient Advocacy and Community Engagement, Dr. Charlene Hafer-Macco. Charlene actually has been very involved with MGFA for many years. She is a previous board member, and she sits on our advocacy committee. And also Kim Eldridge. Kim is a current board member, and she is the chair of our advocacy committee. So welcome to all of you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sam, for that wonderful introduction. As Sam said, I am Kim Eldridge, and today I would like to introduce you all to the MGFA Advocacy Committee. This committee is comprised of individuals from both the MGFA as well as some very passionate volunteers from our MG community. The goal of this committee is to act on behalf of those with myasthenia gravis by identifying advocacy opportunities ranging from access to medications and healthcare to legislative concerns at the national, state, and local levels. We do strive to work together with other rare disease organizations to integrate and coordinate our advocacy efforts. Our committee is comprised of topic leads that will champion advocacy issues as they come up. We are working on an advocacy toolkit that will be a how-to guide for patients and grassroots advocacy, and really anyone that wishes to make a difference locally as well as nationally. Some of our key advocacy efforts this year, the campaign for plasma donations, the CMS and Plasmapheresis petition and awareness, and the new landing page and My MG Voice. Next slide. There we go. Thanks. So the plasma donations in 2020 decreased significantly due to COVID-19, causing plasma shortages throughout the country. IVIG is made from donated plasma, and it takes several months to create. Many in our MG community rely both on IVIG for regular maintenance treatments, as well as treating exacerbations. We have worked to educate the community about the shortage and the need to push for plasma donations. We know that the decrease in donations is going to continue to lead to shortages into the new year. One way that you can help is to spread awareness for the need for plasma donations at centers that use it to develop IVIG. Some sites of care may not prioritize IVIG for myasthenia gravis. If you're having trouble getting your IVIG, talk to your doctor to see if switching to home infusion may be an option for you. Now is also the time to talk to your provider to see if there are other brands that might be a good alternative during the shortage and what they have done to handle the previous shortages. Continue to invite your family and friends to donate plasma. This is so important for all of us. We are our own best advocates. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to you, Charlene.
Thank you, Kim. And it's so nice to see some of our committee members on with us here, because it really does take a team to do advocacy, and we're hoping to engage so many more in the upcoming year. So one of the topics that came up, I am so appreciative in MGFA is of the outpouring of support that we got to really get the Plasmapheresis petition to the CMS, is the Centers for Medicare Services. And one of the policies that was coming up for revision is looking at national coverage for plasmapheresis. This was originally set up in 1992 and it came up for revision. And what the change proposed was that plasmapheresis right now has a national determination for who is eligible to get plasmapheresis. The revision was going to take it to the local regional level. And so what we were afraid of is that there may be differences in the availability of plasmapheresis in the different regions across the United States, which is a big problem during COVID when care is limited, and it may result in some geographic disparities in the availability of a treatment that's so needed for treating MG crisis. So we put out a petition in October, and within about a week and a half, we had 4,000 signatures in support of it, which is just mind-boggling just to get that many. And so we thank you so much. And we heard December 2nd that it was approved. So the determination will remain in the national level. Now, unfortunately, in 2021, they're going to revisit this policy. So stand by for more information on that. So Jenna, go ahead.
Charlene. Hi, everyone. So just to talk a little bit about advocacy promotions and outreach efforts that we've been doing as well. In 2020, we launched our MG Voice, which is advocacy alerts that are designed to provide the community with really short briefs, information and updates that are essential and good to know, and also calls to action. We're going to continue to roll these out next year as well to keep everybody informed and updated. Looking ahead, we're really excited that we're going to be launching a new landing page dedicated specifically to MG advocacy. This will be kind of the go-to spot on the website. So you'll be able to learn about how to be an advocate, any new information that the advocacy team is working on. There'll be toolkits on how to get involved with advocacy on a local level. So you'll have actionable items that you can take and really feel, sometimes people feel really motivated. They want to do something right here and right now. So we're going to put some things in place that when you do feel that way, we can hopefully help facilitate that actionable item really quickly. And additionally, we'll keep you updated in terms of national updates, as well as new educational materials as they come out as well. And we're going to launch that in January. So be on the lookout for that and more to come. And Charlene, I think you want to just give one more update about our outreach this year.
You're on mute, Charlene.
Still on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So just this week, MGFA signed on with the Muscular Dystrophy Association for a call to make sure that our patients with neuromuscular diseases, so myasthenia, that has troubles with respiratory issues, and many of our folks are on immunosuppression, and so what we want to do is make sure that they have access to the vaccine when it comes out.
Charlene. And on behalf of the MGFA and the Advocacy Committee, I want to personally thank all of you for your advocacy efforts and outreach as well. Thank you to those of you who signed the petitions that we've sent out. Thank you to those of you who are being advocates within your own community on a local level, and even for sharing the story of MG and what the journey of that is, really bringing awareness to the community that you live in and to the community at large. We really appreciate your outreach and your efforts, and that's really what's driving us to continue to advocate for the needs of the community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim, Jenna, and Charlene. Really, really appreciate you guys giving the advocacy update and helping people understand how they, what our priorities are and how they can become more involved and why it's so important to be an advocate. So thank you for that very much. So now we're going to transition to our research update. I know this is going to be a familiar face for a lot of you. Dr. Jeffrey Guptill, as I mentioned earlier, he's with Duke University Medical Center. To us, he is the chair of our Medical and Scientific Advisory Board, and he is just wonderful. I mean, I cannot say enough about Jeff. He just gives of his time always, and I'm sure you've seen him on many of our webinars, and he is committed to these town halls and giving the research updates. So please join me in welcoming Jeff. And Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Sam, for the introduction. So tonight we're going to go over the types of grants and the specific programs that MGFA is supporting. We've talked in some of the previous meetings about some of the active projects, but specifically we're going to talk about some new awards that were just made for this upcoming year. And before we go into that, I just wanted to briefly summarize the type of grants, the grant programs that MGFA is currently offering, as well as the type of research that is considered a priority for MGFA. So listed here are some of the 5 main areas of interest. So the first is our biomarkers, and so a lot of you probably aren't familiar with what a biomarker is, but basically that's any type of measured characteristic that can help explain the disease process or response to treatment or identify specific patient groups. So an example of this that you're probably familiar with are the autoantibodies that are present in a lot of patients that have myasthenia gravis. So the acetylcholine receptor antibodies are considered a diagnostic biomarker. But we're also interested in other types of biomarkers that can help improve our management of patients. And currently we don't really have any of those that are widely applicable. We're also interested in understanding the mechanisms of disease. Why do people get MG? We understand some of the basic aspects of how the immune system is reacting in patients, but we don't understand some other very fundamental aspects of it, including the initial mechanisms of the initial triggers for the autoimmunity. Not surprisingly, we're very interested in trying to develop new targeted therapies for MG. As I'm sure you're all aware, most of the treatments that patients currently take, the overwhelming majority of patients are taking therapies that more broadly suppress the immune system. And so what we'd like to do is to develop therapies that very specifically target the disease itself without affecting other aspects of the immune system's reactivity. We're also interested in patient outcomes, so understanding patient outcomes in different scenarios, so with different types of medications, different subgroups of patients, of course. And one of these in particular that we're very interested in is listed under number 5, which is pediatrics. And there's really not a lot of great information in kids with MG. A lot of the research has been conducted in adults. And some of that is because pediatric MG is even rarer than adult MG is. But we feel like it's a very important area for us to promote and study in the future. Next slide. So these are the types of funding areas or types of grants that can be awarded. So the MGFA has a high impact pilot project. The idea behind this particular award is to help people get new ideas off the ground and to develop preliminary data that can then support larger grants. And these programs have been pretty successful in the past. So they're just a small amount of seed money to help develop a project can have big payoffs down the road in terms of what ultimately gets funded in the area of myasthenia. The second is transformative research awards. So these are offered more rarely, and these are specifically geared towards tackling very fundamental questions or very targeted, innovative areas of need within the field. Then there are targeted and special project awards. These are often very, very specific projects, often time sensitive, where there's an opportunity to take advantage of a circumstance or a particular line of research. And here, often the investigator will approach MGFA to conduct a very specific project. Sometimes an example of this might be some preliminary work to support a very special grant submission process. One of these was done recently for a comparative effectiveness study that's ongoing. So it was a small amount of money that turned into a multi-million-dollar project. And the last one is to stimulate the next generation of investigators researching in myasthenia to help continue the work moving forward, and also to improve the pool of clinicians who treat myasthenia gravis patients and increase awareness in the community, so that we have both a very active group of people conducting research and clinicians that really know a lot about how to manage myasthenia. Next slide. So for the pilot awards this year, there were 9 submissions, which is a great number. We saw some similar numbers last year as well. There is a review panel that reviews all the proposals. The proposals are reviewed according to, it's very similar to an NIH format, National Institute of Health, how they review grants. And then after each reviewer individually scores the grant, there's a meeting where all of the reviewers get together to go over the scores and determine the final recommendations for who to send to the board to recommend for funding. And so the pilot grants are typically 1-year awards in the amount of $55,000. Next slide. There were 2 grants recommended for funding this year. One is what we would consider a basic research or a translational research project, and the other is considered a clinical research project that has more of a direct impact on patient care. And we'll go over these in more detail, but the first award was to Dr. Kevin O'Connor at Yale University, who runs a very well-known lab focusing on B cells and immune cell in myasthenia gravis. And the second was to Dr. Michael Hare, who is a neurologist at University of Vermont. Next slide. And the other grant that was awarded in the fall was a seronegative grant. This is one of those targeted grant opportunities that in this instance is focused specifically on patients that don't have detectable antibodies. And so this group of patients, unfortunately, has been neglected in a lot of research in myasthenia up to this point. So the idea behind this grant is to hopefully fill in that gap. So there were 3 submissions for this specific grant, and they were reviewed the same way as the pilot grants, and 1 grant was recommended for funding in the amount of $150,000 over up to 2 years. So the recommended grant for the seronegative proposal was awarded to myself as well as Dr. O'Connor as the PIs. There is a much larger group that is working on this project, though, as I'll tell you about in a minute. Next slide. And so now I'm just going to summarize, like, what are these grants about? What do they want to do? So the first pilot grant is Dr. O'Connor's grant. And so basically what he's interested in doing is looking for biomarkers. So that was one of the research areas of high interest to myasthenia. And specifically what he's interested in is understanding more about the autoantibodies in the patients that have AChR antibody MG. And so there are a lot of things that we don't understand about the antibodies. And one of those aspects is that the level of the antibody doesn't really tell you much about how sick a person is or how they're responding to therapy. And we don't really understand why that is. And so what Dr. O'Connor is proposing is to look at the function of these antibodies. And we know that there are 3 or 4 different ways that the antibodies can work in the body, but we don't really have a good way to measure the different functions of these antibodies. And it's likely that different patients may have different relative contributions in terms of how each of these antibodies is affecting the patient. And so understanding that may help us to better choose therapies for patients or predict their response to therapies. Next slide. Dr. Hare's grant is to look at adverse effects of medications. And typically in the clinic, we will record, what happens to a patient if they experience an adverse effect. So if a patient is taking steroids for a long period of time and they get osteoporosis, we would document that. In a clinical trial, a similar thing is done. And then it's typically rated as mild, moderate, or severe. But for each individual adverse event, it can obviously affect patients very differently. So a patient who has, some upset stomach from after they take a medication versus one that gets osteoporosis and, breaks their hip, that's a very, very different outcome for patients. And we don't have a way to really measure that very well. And so what Dr. Hare proposes is to develop it's essentially like a currency where different types of adverse effects are weighted more than others. They quote, cost more. And so a whole series of potential adverse effects have been scored by both clinicians as well as patients to understand the relative importance or weight that they would have for a particular outcome. And so now with this particular grant, Dr. Hare plans to now bring this AEU, this adverse event cost unit, so to speak, and bring it into the clinic and evaluate it with his patients and then in other centers to see how it works, to see if it holds up in terms of what they've developed so far. Next slide. And for the seronegative grant, there are 3 different projects that are part of it. So the first project I'm leading, and for that project, we want to understand in much greater detail than we have currently the clinical aspects of patients that have seronegative myasthenia. So to understand their age at the time that they have symptoms, how severe is the disease, what treatments patients are taking, and also what are their ultimate outcomes, and can we find specific outcomes or specific treatments that seem to be better for seronegative MG patients. Currently, we treat them very similarly to acetylcholine receptor antibody positive patients, but that might not be the right thing to do. So that's project one. Project two is to understand the immune system in seronegative myasthenia patients. So there's really very little information in that area right now. And so we specifically want to understand in great detail how the immune system cells are working in this group of patients, specifically the B cells that produce the antibodies and T cells that help facilitate the activity of the B cells. And that project will be led by Dr. John Yee, who's also at Duke. And then the third project is by Dr. O'Connor again. And here he is going to be looking for new antibodies in the blood. So by definition, these seronegative patients, we can't detect with the current technology and assays that we have available to us, testing techniques available, we can't detect any antibodies. And so at Yale, they've developed a series of new technologies for discovering new autoantibodies that may be present in the blood of patients with seronegative myasthenia. And if we can discover new ones, then we can develop new tests to hopefully be able to diagnose patients earlier in a lot of cases and without having to resort to tests like the repetitive nerve stimulation test and single fiber EMG. Next slide. Okay, and now we're going to shift gears, and I think this is something that is on the top of everyone's mind currently. And we're getting a lot of questions in our clinic, and I know from talking to my colleagues across the country, they're getting lots of questions about the vaccines. And there was a statement that's on the MGFA website that was put together recently that I'd also refer you to go to myasthenia.org to get some information. But I just want to talk about a couple aspects of the vaccine. So one of the main questions that we get is, should I get the vaccine? And related to that is oftentimes, can I get COVID from a vaccine? Or oftentimes it's more broad than that. Can I get a particular disease or infection from getting a vaccine, whether it's the flu vaccine or pneumonia, pneumovax vaccine, et cetera? And so what's important to know related to the COVID-19 vaccines that are available now and what will be in the very near future is that none of these vaccines, you cannot get COVID-19 from the vaccine itself. And so what we do worry about for vaccines is when the vaccine is made from a live virus that has been rendered, quote, harmless, that it's been weakened to the point that it shouldn't cause any problems for people. But for myasthenia patients, we worry that when their immune system may be suppressed, if they're on medications like prednisone and azathioprine, that their immune system may not be able to fight off this very weak virus, and it could activate and cause the disease. So in general, we avoid live attenuated viruses in patients with myasthenia. None of the vaccines that are the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine, the two vaccines that'll be available first, neither of those is a live attenuated vaccine. Both of them are RNA vaccines. And so on this slide in the far right, it's a small piece of the genetic material that the virus uses to replicate itself. And that's all they're injecting. But what happens is the body takes up that genetic code and presents it. It recognizes it that it's foreign and should not be there, and then generates the immune response against that genetic code, which then when the virus actually enters the body, it's already primed and ready and kills the virus. Next slide.
I'm trying to get the arrows to come up, Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So while Sam's working on that, so the next slide, it just is a summary of the different vaccines and how, there it is, and how they, you know, what they're made out of essentially. And so you'll notice on rows 2 and 3, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, that both of these are RNA vaccines. And so they're just injecting a small piece of the genetic code for the virus, but not the intact virus at all. And both of them are extremely effective, as I'm sure you have heard in news coverage. And so there's number one, there's no risk of getting COVID from the vaccine. And then, but 2 is, you know, should I as an MG patient get the vaccine? And so an important thing to know is that in the trials where the vaccines were studied, specifically for the Pfizer one, the one that's available right now, is that patients with autoimmune disease were excluded from those studies. So we don't really have any information on, you know, how a patient with myasthenia specifically would react to the vaccine. But overall, the data suggests that the vaccine is quite safe. Of course, there could be a reaction, but at this point, it doesn't appear like it would be any more, you know, likely than any of the other vaccines that are currently available. So at least from my personal perspective, I'm recommending that my patients get the vaccine, either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine when it becomes available. The other question that I'm sure is going to come up is how do I get in line if I want to get the vaccine? And I can't really answer that part of it because it's going to be probably very locally dependent on the landscape there, like, you know, where the vaccines are offered. And then there may be local, I know at least in North Carolina, there are state strategies where each state is in part coming up with their process and stratification for how the vaccine will be administered to different patient groups. So I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions that people have.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for giving our research update. And I am going to look at the chat because people have taken the time. And I also just want to say to everybody, in the interest of time, we do get all of the questions recorded from Zoom and we do answer them. And then we post them on our website after the town halls. So let me just go and pick a few questions that Dr. Guptill can answer before we wrap up. And Mike Antonellis, head of our marketing and communication, said that everything will be on the MGFA YouTube page as well. Okay, so are there going to be any follow-up studies of the vaccine in MG patients? Do you know that?
None by the companies that I'm aware of. There's been some discussion already about trying to study the effects of the vaccine in patients with myasthenia. This would be probably a extension of some of the work that we've been doing for CARE MG, which is a project to a registry essentially to capture information on patients with MG who have had COVID-19 infections to see how they have done and to understand, you know, what treatments they needed, did it cause an exacerbation if they got COVID-19, et cetera. So there's been some talk about potentially expanding what we're doing into studying the vaccine response in patients. Our initial thought on it is that it will be very difficult for the clinicians to capture this information, and it would probably be much better if it's directed out to the patients in the form of surveys or something like that. This could be something that could be done through the registry or potentially through other mechanisms. I think it would be a great idea because I think could go a long way to, making sure that patients have as much information as they possibly can when making a decision. I'm just a little worried that by the time we get it up and going, I think the hope is for everyone that the vaccines will be pretty widely available, and the decision you'll be making a decision before we'd have any information for you. So, but anyway, I think it's something that we're discussing right now, but not firmed up yet.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jeff. Sam asked, are there currently any active studies that include patients with congenital myasthenic syndrome?
Yes. So there are. So one of the groups that's very active in congenital myasthenia is the Oxford group in the UK, and they've done some clinical trials in congenital myasthenia, and they've done a lot of work, as has the Mayo Clinic, in trying to understand the underlying genetics and of the different forms of congenital myasthenia. There was recently a study that was supported by MGFA on congenital myasthenia out at UC Davis. I can't remember if that one is still active or not, though.
Okay, thank you. I'm really trying to get to any research questions. I do want to acknowledge that I see all of the great back and forth on the podcast. And MGFA actually has a podcast as part of our marketing communication strategy for next year. We will be doing podcasts, so share that.
So I see one question
you have volunteers
about small business funding.
What'd you say?
Yeah, so there's a question about small business funding for startups developing solutions. So not currently. So right now, the grant mechanisms, I think, I'm not sure if it's overtly exclude for-profit entities, but it traditionally has not been a program for that particular avenue. There are other programs, specifically government-funded programs, that are specific for startups like this to develop new treatments and therapeutics for a whole host of diseases, including neurologic diseases. So most of that work would go in that direction.
Okay. Zach, this dovetails off what you were talking about before. Zach Rowe, I believe Oxford University has been doing some much more sensitive antibody tests than are standard in the US. Will the research for new biomarkers in seronegative MG be using that more sensitive methodology?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, so the Oxford University group has a very sensitive assay called a cell-based assay for detecting acetylcholine receptor antibodies. And basically what we know about that is if you take seronegative MG patients, they test negative on the typical test that we can get, through the commercial labs that we would use in the clinic. If you take their blood and test it on this cell-based assay, about a quarter to 40% of them will test positive on this cell-based assay. So it's a much more sensitive assay than the ones that are currently widely commercially available and where most of our testing is done. The drawback is that it's very labor intensive. So it's unlikely that it will become a widespread, at least with the current technology, a very widespread, have widespread availability. There is another lab at University of British Columbia that's also doing it now in North America, and I've been sending some samples to them for the past 6 months or so. For this specific grant, we will not be using the Oxford technology, and part of that's because it's been pretty well studied. Like, we know a lot about it and how it works. So we're going to look for something else, like another approach to get at still the group of patients that even on the cell-based assay don't test positive.
Okay, thank you. Phil asks, Jeff, how can an MG patient indicate to their PCP that they need the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines due to our autoimmune condition?
So I think for that one, it's probably contacting your primary care doctor and telling them. So we were talking on the earlier town hall that there's going to be a lot of people that fit into a category of high risk. So a lot of obviously older adults in this country that often have multiple medical conditions that would put them into a high risk category. So I don't really know how that's going to play out in terms of how you categorize different conditions to say one's above the other. But I think that what you can do is tell your primary care doctor that you're interested in getting the vaccine, and make them aware that when it becomes available, you want to be at the top of the list. And then again, it's probably going to come down to local conditions in terms of how that's actually going to be implemented, based on a number of factors, including the patient population that's at the primary care doctor's office, other potential health department programs potentially, and other comorbidities that patients have. So unfortunately, it's a hard question to answer at this point. There's a lot of stuff we don't know.
Thank you for that. Zach just added that he hopes your research proves fruitful and seronegative patients really get the short end of the stick, and he's delighted you're focusing on it. And then Kathy asked, would a neurologist order the vaccine?
So I can only speak for my institution, and maybe Charlene can comment on this too. So currently, I can comment that we don't know anything yet. Is that the focus right now is to vaccinate the frontline healthcare providers, and then we know that there's going to be almost like not a lottery, but there's a tier for the rest of the employees that would get have the opportunity to vaccinate after that. But then after that, out among the for patients, I really don't know. I would suspect though that particularly early on, the primary care doctors I think are going to be on the front lines and not the neurologists. The biggest impact in terms of distributing the vaccine for vaccinating people is going to be with the primary care doctors, and not with the neurologists, not with the specialists. So I would say go to your primary care provider first.
And I would probably second that. You want to ask your neurologist their opinion, get their input on the vaccine, but and then I also am asking my primary cares as well, because if someone's had an allergic reaction, we're going to think through it a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. But as Jeff said, I do believe it's going to be primary care will be delivering the vaccines, or some of the CVS, Walgreens, the many different minute clinics, but the primary will probably write the order for that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure, if there are statements or letters that need to be written in terms to support your candidacy for getting the vaccine early, I'm sure a lot of neurologists would be willing to do that. I hope it really doesn't come to that. It really shouldn't. Is that this should be something that it should be widely rolled out and not have many restrictions placed on it.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate both of you fielding the questions. And Charlene, thank you for helping out as well. I want to wrap up in the interest of time, and I really appreciate all the speakers who came on tonight to share their experience or their expertise with our community. I appreciate our community members allowing us to go on and for staying on. Again, we capture all the questions, we do answer them, then we post it as a PDF document, we put it on our website for you, along with the taping of this town hall. Both of them will be posted there. So I would like to conclude with thanking you all so very much for your ongoing support and your dedication. We just really feel very very proud to be in this MG community with all of you, and just can't thank you enough for all of your ongoing support of MGFA as an organization. We wish you a very, very nice holiday season, and we certainly wish you an even better new year. I mean, I feel like I should be chanting 2021, 2021. So just really, really appreciate all of you so, so much, and really look forward to the new year with you guys. So take care for now, and we'll certainly be in touch. Take care.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See, Sam, this is we need a DJ party for 2021 to bring.
DJ party all day long. That's right.
2020, I don't even.
I love it.
Yeah, we to bring in the new year, right? I don't know.
We do. We really
I'm
do.
thinking outside of the box at this point. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks. Take care, guys.
Bye. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
You make it. Sorry, I have like a new computer screen. I'm trying to figure it out. Bye, guys.
Bye.